Okay. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, on behalf of the organizing partners, that's IDEAS, the Finnish Ministry for Foreign Affairs, DEVAL, and UNICEF, I would like to welcome you to our session on country-led evaluations and the SDGs, an urgent call for action. My name is Thomas Rossmueller. I'm a Partnerships and Capacity Development Officer at the UNICEF Evaluation Office, and I will be the moderator for this session. With a little more than 5 years left until 2030, and to achieve our global goals, the SDGs, we need to act now. We, the partners here, strongly believe that country-led evaluations of the SDGs can contribute significantly to accelerate and regain progress towards the goals. In these crucial 5 years, policymakers urgently need reliable evidence to take well-informed decisions and get back on track towards Agenda 2030. With this session, we want to raise awareness of the importance and the urgency and the value of conducting country-led evaluations of the Sustainable Development Goals. But we don't want to just talk here about it. We want to give you some practical insights, some hands-on experiences from experts from all over the world that were engaged in SDG evaluations. We hope that you will find this session inspiring and encouraging. And for now, let me hand over to my colleague Sarah Clear from DEVAL, here she comes, the German Institute for Development Evaluation, to deliver some opening remarks on behalf of the partners.
Thank you, Thomas, for the honor to give those opening remarks for this really relevant World Café on SDG evaluation. Well, throughout the day, we heard about the SDGs. I think in each and every agenda point, people refer to the SDGs, which shows their importance, it shows their relevance, and it also shows the urgency. We're 5 years away from 2030. We have 5 years left to achieve the SDGs, and we all know we are not on track. Thomas will show us how far away we are from the track actually in a minute, but even without knowing those details, we know we are not on track to achieve the SDGs, and we have 5 years left. And why do we know that? Because there is a lot of monitoring data available on the SDGs. Above all, we have the voluntary national reports, the VNRs, in which countries, report on their progress towards the SDGs. And that's a very powerful tool, those VNRs. They show us if we're on track, but what they do not show, what they do not explain is why we are not on track or why we are on track. What could we do better? And there is information missing on that part. How can we do better? And here we have this very powerful tool we're all very familiar with, which is evaluation. But there are not many evaluations on the SDGs. However, last year, a really important milestone was achieved when the UN resolution was passed on the strengthening of VNR through country-led evaluations. And why country-led? Because we're talking about development, and development of a country can only happen if there is country ownership. So the country-led evaluation on the SDGs is what is important to have for us to have the evidence to see how we can do better. So that was one important milestone, and then Thomas already mentioned there was a working group formed already 5 years ago of the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, here represented through Neamari Heinonen, IDEAS represented through Ara Campo, UNICEF represented through Thomas Rossmueller, and DEVAL. And this working group, what we tried to do was to give guidance or support to countries that want to implement country-led evaluations. We developed a guidebook on country-led evaluations, and the second version will come out soon, showcasing very nice examples which can easily be followed how to do that. One example of that was showcased this morning already by Jocelyn Corrales from Ecuador. Jocelyn told us how Ecuador did it, how Ecuador implemented a country-led SDG evaluation. And she also, I was lucky over lunch, she gave me the VNR report, where you can already find the data from the evaluation. So Ecuador knows if it's on track and also why it's on track and where it can do better. This is a good example to show and to follow, and I know we will hear about more examples of those that kind in a minute. And with this, I would like to give over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Sarah. As I mentioned, with this session, we want to emphasize how important it is to conduct these country-led SDG evaluations and give some practical examples. That's why the main part of the session will be conducted in country roundtables. I'll explain them later to you. They will be around these screens here, where experts from all over the world will be there to share their experiences and answer your questions. Before we come to that, we'll have a very brief panel to set the stage and give you a taste and inspire you to advocate for country-led SDG evaluations. I will introduce our distinguished speakers in just a minute. But before that, I wanted to just say a few words on the subtitle of our session, especially on the urgent part. Why is it very urgent now to do these evaluations? Why the urgency? Of course, as we mentioned, we have only 5 years to go, and we need to know how we are doing with the SDGs. So we need to have a good look around on the data and see what's the progress. Which ones of these should we prioritize if we choose to evaluate them? And a good source that is published every year to see the progress is the Sustainable Development Goals report from the UN. This 2024 edition was launched this July after the high-level political forum on sustainable development. And it includes information on the status of the SDGs. When we look at that, unfortunately, the current status of the SDGs is rather depressing. This year's report found that only 17% of the SDGs are on track. Nearly half of them are showing minimal to moderate progress, and over 1/3 actually have stalled, or progress is even regressing. How does that look quickly in terms of the individual SDGs? That's the chart that we have there. I will not go into detail, and please keep in mind this is the global progress. There are countries, for example, as we heard this morning from China, that made significant progress or even achieved some of the targets or goals already. But worldwide, the progress is alarming. For example, Goal 1, no poverty, shows moderate, marginal progress, and in Goal 2, zero hunger, we have a lot of regression. But what is missing on this chart? What is it that we don't see? That's actually very important. What we don't see is the gaps in data, the parts that we don't know. There is also information on that in the report, but just for purposes of quickly showing it, I'll show you the chart from last year, where you can see it included. The gray bars here show where we actually don't even know where we are in achieving these goals. And I assume it's not that we're actually doing great in these parts and we just don't know it. It's probably just extending the red bar. So one important thing that we need to do is filling these evidence gaps with evidence, with evaluations. But back to this year's SDG report. As I said, this was launched in July after the high-level political forum. A few months later, another big UN meeting was held, that we of course all know, the UN General Assembly. And this year, there was the Summit for the Future. The Summit of the Future, all of the leaders, government, and the international community came together and agreed on a new resolution. We also heard about this one this morning, which is the Pact for the Future. This was adopted not even a month ago, and I will not go into details of this report, but I just want to highlight two things, which is the pact includes a strong commitment to accelerate progress, to invest more, and to do everything we can to achieve the SDGs by 2030. And it also includes an explicit commitment to evidence-based planning, policy and decision-making, and to investing in the development of the necessary capacities in these areas. I hope that the discussions today in the country tables after the session and overall here at the NEC conference will help us find new innovative ways to generate the evidence that we need to do more for the SDGs, to implement actually the Pact for the Future, find ways to share experiences, but also to build, of course, the capacities to produce evidence and eventually achieve the 2030 agenda. Because in the end, it's not only about achieving the goals that we all committed to in 2015. It's very urgent to find evidence to tackle the world's most pressing problems of today: growing inequalities, the effects of climate change that we're feeling more and more every year. So the time to act is now, and this evidence is needed now more than ever. And with that, I would like to go to our panel, which will briefly share some thoughts. And without further ado, I would like to go to our first speaker, Ms. Ada Ocampo. I think for many here, Ada doesn't need an introduction. She has basically committed her whole life working for the United Nations, advocating strongly for the use of evidence and conducting country-led SDG evaluations. Now she's continuing passionately advocating for these areas as president of the Ideas Network. So with that introduction, Ada, I would like to quickly invite you to share your thoughts on why it is urgent and important for governments to conduct these country-led SDG evaluations, and how these evaluations can be used for good governance. I'll give you 4 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas. I will try to be as brief as possible. Being in Latin America, that's quite a challenge, but I'll try my best. As you all know, and Thomas has referred to that to a certain extent, the world is facing several crises. We are in a context where multi-crises are really affecting the global world with several devastating effects. Apart from the environmental crisis, as you know, there are some other crises. There are regional conflicts with global consequences around the world. Among these global conflicts, due to these conflicts, we have millions and millions of people that are refugees and are being displaced for their origin cities and countries. According to statistics, more than 50% of the displaced population are women and children. We also have, in most of our countries, we have situations where poverty is increasing, democracy is being threatened, and we can go on and on and on. Given this context, we have the urgent and, I would say, ethical and responsible role to really do something as evaluators, as governments, as community of evaluators. And because the principles of the agenda are also being threatened, we cannot say that we are doing our best to leave no one behind, because statistics are showing the contrary. Also, if you have seen in the graphic that Thomas has shared about the progress towards the SDGs, we have that in SDG 6, water and sanitation, there's practically no progress. In any part of the world, there is no green. And the second and the third that are in a very worse situation are unfortunately SDG 10, reducing inequalities, and SDG 5, about gender equality. So can we actually say that we are doing well, that we are leaving no one behind, that we are working for a better and more equal and just world? I think there's a big question mark that all of us should reflect and probably be a bit more humble on the way we reflect the progress that we are making. So given this context, evaluation can play a role by providing not only evidence, because evidence will not directly lead to decision making. Decision making is a highly political, occurs in highly political environments, and we have to take that into account. Therefore, we need country-led evaluations of the SDGs for various reasons. When, Thomas, you asked me about good governance. If we talk about principles underlying good governance, about transparency, about accountability, we are talking about good governance, and evaluation can contribute to that with a strong evidence, but not only with a strong evidence, but actually ensuring that the evaluations are influential. We have 9 years down the line of the endorsement of the 2030 agenda, we see that we not only have enough country-led evaluations, but to some extent, we are not really reflecting in our discourse, in our evaluations, in our reports. We are not reflecting how the situation is really, the multiple crises of our days are actually affecting the progress towards the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. It is important for us to ensure that governments that have signed the Agenda 2030 and that have re-signed with this new commitment are held accountable. And for that, we have different stakeholders that can play a role. Parliamentarians creating the demand and holding governments accountable, civil society with their voice, and governments as well. Governments have to demonstrate accountability, and one way of doing that is actually evaluation. Evaluation is a powerful tool. Evaluation can also, country-led evaluations mean evaluations managed by the government with the participation of different stakeholders. And that also can create a big opportunity for all actors of society. If we talk about country-led, we are saying that the government has an opportunity, together with different stakeholders, to demonstrate that they are accountable, that they are responsible, that they can be held accountable for signing these agreements. And also they can demonstrate that they are at the driver's seat. And by being at the driver's seat, they can actually challenge the role of donors that historically have demanded evaluations to hold the governments accountable for the money they were bringing to them. So evaluation has a strong, also, it's a strong opportunity to also demonstrate how evaluation can actually contribute to transformational change. The Agenda 2030 is transformational in nature. And we really have an opportunity in evaluations to demonstrate to what extent the changes that we are reporting, the changes that we are proud of, are really transformational or not. And for evaluators all of us need to become activists and to really, really walk the talk and promote evaluation, but perhaps not only activists, but also influencers. We need all to become influencers in a way that we can actually change the way different actors of society are thinking and move towards country-led evaluations that will produce evidence that will actually influence public policies, will influence national strategies, and that actually will contribute to the transformational change we are all hoping for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for these important points, Ada. I promised you a short panel, so I will go straight to our next speaker. It's Nea-Marie Heinonen. Nea-Marie is a lead evaluation specialist and the deputy director at the Development Evaluation Unit in the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland. She has more than 15 years of experience in international development policy and cooperation. She's specialized in planning, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And as lead evaluation specialist, she manages strategic evaluations commissioned by the Development Evaluation Unit. Nea-Marie has developed several tools, guidelines, and trainings to increase the quality and learning within the ministry. And she is part of various international networks working on development evaluation. I just want to also mention she was also within the UN system and worked for the UNFPA Uganda country office as an M&E officer. So, without further words on the bio, I would like to ask you, Nea-Marie, and keep in mind that Nea-Marie will also moderate a country table on the Finland case study. So you will have an opportunity to ask her more questions afterwards. But Nea-Marie, could you just briefly share your thoughts in general on the benefits of country-led SDG evaluation?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. And first, I'd like to thank the organizers of this event and also the host government for organizing this wonderful at this wonderful venue. So I think there are many benefits. First of all, I'd like to say that evaluations have to be contextualized and can be conducted in many different ways at different levels as well. So there is no one-size-fits-all model that we are talking about. So through our partnership, we have learned about different ways to conduct these evaluations that are suited for different types of contexts and needs. I would like to highlight 4 key benefits of conducting national evaluations of Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. The first one, the most obvious benefit for anyone, is that since we are closing in on 2030, for any country it would be a valuable source of information to analyze progress in terms of implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, not just to review the status quo, but also to be able to think beyond 2030. If you want to plan beyond 2030, you need that information. And I believe evaluators are experts in producing that type of objective information. Secondly, the process itself is valuable in bringing different ministries and government representatives together, as well as to work together with different experts and stakeholders. Going through the process of evaluation also functions as a platform to discuss different relevant issues and national priorities. Thirdly, the benefit would be that when such an evaluation is conducted, the process itself can be can build capacities and skills, as well as empower the officials to engage in with these types of global goals, engage with them more or in a new way. Being part of this type of country-led process can be highly motivating for officials from the learning perspective. And lastly, we heard that the resolution, it actually calls for country-led evaluations. Also, it is a way to provide strengthened evidence base for VNRs or other relevant government reports. So with evaluation evidence included in those reports, they are, or in any government plans, I think they can become more effective. Lastly, I want to say that there are still quite many countries that have not yet thought about conducting a national country-led evaluation. I hope that our session can inspire other countries in providing insights about the different ways that these evaluations can be conducted and inspire other countries to walk this path, including also countries in the global north. I think it's high time that such evaluations get the due attention. We are really drawing closer to 2030, and as an international community, we also need those lessons, as we learned from Thomas about the gaps. We need lessons on how to plan beyond. So I really would like to put forward an action point for the Beijing Action Plan, if that is allowed, to really get those governments to conduct a really holistic, country-led, national 2030 agenda evaluation in different countries. So I really urge everyone in this room to cordially push for this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nia Marie, for already crafting the first action point. Now let me come to Dr. Bala Yusuf-Yunusa. Dr. Bala is the Senior Technical Advisor to the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Nigeria on the SDGs. He provides technical leadership and policy guidance on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda in Nigeria, and he was closely involved in Nigeria's evaluations of SDG 3 and 4. I want to mention that Dr. Bala was also one of the driving forces that made the UN resolution on strengthening the VNRs through country-led evaluation happen, that Claire already mentioned earlier today. This resolution was adopted last year, and it was sponsored and led by Nigeria. So, dear Dr. Bala, in light of these achievements, I want to invite you to share your thoughts on two things briefly. How can country-led SDG evaluations be used to inform and influence public policies? And could you say a few words about the significance of this resolution and why it was important for Nigeria to take a driver's seat or place and push this initiative forward?
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas, and a very good afternoon. Let me begin by noting that when we decided as a country to conduct a country-led independent evaluation, to the best of our knowledge, we were the first country to have initiated that process in the global south. And this was an expression of Nigeria's commitment to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And that happened with the timely establishment of an independent office right in the presidency with fourfold mandate. One of the core mandates of that office is monitoring, evaluation, and reporting for the SDGs. And therefore, by 2019, we felt it was time to begin the process of checking what is working and what is not working. And we decided to go about it with three objectives: for learning, accountability, and then evidence-based voluntary national reporting, recognizing that the VNRs are more useful and helpful when they are inclusive, participatory in the process, but more importantly, when they are evidence-based. And therefore, on the eve of presenting our second voluntary national reviews in 2020, we commenced the process of evaluating priority SDGs in Nigeria, and we eventually conducted successfully the evaluation of SDG 3 and 4. Answering that specific question on what we used the outcome or the recommendations or the key findings of the evaluation, we're using it to inform policy implementation at the national and at the subnational level. we now know that even if we put the entire budget of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the next 6 years, that is remaining to reach the 2030, we might unlikely going to achieve SDG 3, because from the findings of the evaluation, there are other socio-cultural barriers to health service provisioning than financial resources. So we are working now closely to implement some of these recommendations by working with national and subnational governments to do sensitization, advocacy, and if you like, reorienting the people, because in some part of the country, even if we provide the best healthcare facilities, uptake will be a challenge because of deeply rooted socio-cultural barriers. For example, in some part of the north, it's considered as a sign of weakness. I mean, it's coming from the evaluation as a sign of weakness for a pregnant woman to deliver in a health facility. So, I mean, you have to do more on advocacy, sensitization, you know, with the traditional rulers, religious leaders, to make sure that you improve health service uptake in those communities. So these are the key things that came out of the evaluation of priority SDGs that we've conducted in Nigeria, SDG 3 and SDG 4. And now we are working with the 36 states to make sure that the key recommendations are being implemented. So we're doing advocacy, sensitization around the key findings of the SDGs. Now, another way of expressing Nigeria's commitment to the 2030 agenda was to go all the way to support, sponsor, and promote country-led independent evaluation of the SDGs. And that culminated into the United Nations standalone resolution on strengthening voluntary national reviews via country-led evaluation. And that resolution was adopted April 2023. And with that, we are now asking or suggesting that member countries should use that framework, the resolution, to actually conduct country-led evaluation of the SDGs in the remaining 5 to 6 years that we have. For the sake of time, I will stop here, and thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much, Dr. Bala, Nia Marie, and Ada, for sharing your thoughts. We'll now come to the main part of our session, which, as I promised, are the roundtables with the country experiences. And we have experts from all places in the world. That includes from here, from China. Dr. Bala from Nigeria will host the table. We have Ecuador, Finland with Nia Marie. We have Costa Rica and Uganda. And I will now briefly introduce the speakers to you. So, I think Eddie should be, yeah, there he is. So, the Costa Rica table will be over there and will be led by Eddie Garcia. Eddie Garcia has led he's the director of the evaluation unit at Mideplan, the Ministry of Planning in Costa Rica. And he has led important reforms in the Costa Rican national evaluation system, such as the National Evaluation Policy and Evaluation Agenda. The evaluation unit has completed a country-led evaluation of the SDGs in 2021 and is now managing another evaluation, this time on the National Biodiversity Strategy of Costa Rica. If you want to join Eddie's session, over there, and I would now like to invite Eddie to just briefly speak 1 minute about the topic and what you will share at your roundtable.
Before I start to using my minute, please, I suggest to move to channel 4, because I will do it in Spanish. ¿Listo?
Yes.
Bueno, muchas gracias por estar en esta sesión. Yo les voy a hablar de un caso, de una evaluación que nos ha consumido prácticamente 1 año y medio de trabajo, de mucho esfuerzo y de mucho aprendizaje relacionada con la materia de biodiversidad, medio ambiente. Voy a hablar en clave de gestión de evaluaciones, tratando de ser lo más técnico posible. Creo que es una ventaja de mi mesa. Y también, sobre todo, voy a tratar de responder o abordar el proceso en 3 puntos centrales. ¿Qué hicimos? ¿Cómo lo hicimos? ¿Y para qué? Eso sería lo que voy a ofrecerles en esta tarde. Gracias.
Thank you, Eddie. Eddie will present in Spanish, but we'll have some interpreter ready there to consecutively interpret the presentation. And I will just go across the room to introduce the other speakers. Next speaker will be Timothy Lubanga, who is sitting over there, back in the room at that screen. Timothy is Commissioner for Monitoring and Evaluation at the Office of the Prime Minister of Uganda. There he is managing the national M&E system and co-chairing the national M&E working group that, among others, is developing national M&E policy. And importantly, Timothy has led the country-led evaluation of leaving no one behind in Uganda. Timothy, please introduce the topic of your session in 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas, and good afternoon to all of you. Uganda has been part of the journey, like many of your countries, since 2015 in the implementation of the SDGs. And in that journey, we have learned, we started with a lot of difficulties, but 7 years in the implementation, we looked at the main 3 areas that the government did on SDGs. One is to mainstream SDGs in the National Development Plan. Number 2 is to promote the localization of SDGs, to take it from the high level of the New York language and understanding, and to bring it down to what it actually means in the country. And number 3 is to develop a robust implementation arrangement. So after 7 years of implementation, we decided to evaluate this and learn from our journey. I am inviting you to come to this corner at the time when we are forming groups, and we share the lessons of our journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Timothy. We'll come to the next table, which will be the experiences of China. And I would like to start with introducing Ms. Xu Liping. She's a director of the research division at the International Poverty Reduction Center in China and a senior research fellow with extensive experience in poverty and inequality measurement, impact evaluation, and social policy. Ms. Liping is also engaged in research for different international organizations such as the World Bank, UNICEF, and UNDP, and for Chinese government sectors in the past. She's the author of many academic papers and has spoken at numerous international conferences. And Ms. Liping will present her case together with Mr. Zhao Zhefeng over here. Mr. Zhao Feng is a professor and doctoral supervisor at the Nankai University. He's an expert in sustainable development. He has put forward the ecological policy system in China and a path for enhancing the SDGs here in China. Mr. Zhao Feng is a member of different expert groups on sustainable development, a member of the board of directors of the China Society for Sustainable Development, and an expert in UNDP's umbrella project on sustainable development. I would like to invite our partners here to speak 1 minute about the topics of their presentations, and there will also be interpretation available at this table.
大家好，中国在2020年完成了消除绝对贫困的目标。那接下来呢，我将给大家分享一下中国是如何实现消除贫困的目标的。这也是我们2030议程当中的目标1。那么，在这个我们消除贫困的过程当中，我们也运用了 国家领导的监测和评估，我也会跟大家分享一下我们是如何确保我们能够实现脱贫，如何用好监测评估，保证我们的脱贫的效果的。欢迎大家加入我们的讨论。
非常感谢给我们这样一个机会。中国作为全球人口的第2大国，在1994年就开始制定了中国的可持续发展战略。然后，中国也是在2016年第一个以国家名义发布推进2030可持续发展议程的国别方案的一个国家。那么这10年来，一直在积极的推进从国家层面上和次国家层面上来如何来更好的落实2030可持续发展议程。所以这几年中国的 SDG 的目标进展整体上来看呢，相对是比较好的。那么一会呢，我也想分享一下我们中国在可持续发展方面，在推进2030可持续发展议程这样一个层面上，如何做了哪些行动，然后取得哪些成效。感谢，如果有机会参加我们这样一个子论坛，谢谢。
Thank you very much, Zhao Feng and Ms. Limping. And given China's great achievements of lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, I'm sure this will be a very interesting presentation and discussion at that table. Moving forward across the world, our partner, Nia Marie, will be sitting here in the middle. I will not introduce her again, but Nia Marie, could you just quickly give an overview of your discussion and presentation?
Sure, thanks. So Finland was the first country in the global north to conduct a national evaluation on the Agenda 2030 and SDG implementation. So far, we've conducted 2 rounds of national evaluations. So if you come to my table, you'll hear about the 2 country-led evaluations that took the whole of the government and whole of society approach, and then ones that were participatory. The focus in the evaluations was evaluating the national coordination and steering of the implementation of Agenda 2030. I will briefly present the 2 evaluation cases, their approaches, and what we learned from the process. In this group, you will be able to reflect on how to initiate a country-led evaluation and what could be the facilitating aspects. And lastly, of course, I will share the Finnish experiences on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nia Marie. Going on to our expert from Ecuador, Mr. Julio Alfonso Olivio Plazas, the Director of Evaluation at the National Planning Secretariat of Ecuador.
Thank you, Thomas. Good afternoon, everybody. It's for me a pleasure to be with you sharing about our SDG evaluation. Like my friend Eddie, I'm going to speak in Spanish too. Nosotros desde Ecuador estamos aquí para contarles un poco la experiencia que hemos tenido en la evaluación con enfoque DS a partir de la política de desnutrición crónica infantil, una evaluación que para nosotros realmente se ha convertido en un reto, porque desde el partir de definir una política pública que no estaba mapeada en un banco de políticas en el país, hasta establecer cuál es el objeto real que vamos a evaluar, porque no evaluamos la política como tal, sino más bien la gobernanza de esta política, se convirtieron en retos que fueron un poco superándose en este proceso. Entonces, es una evaluación que todavía no tiene su informe final con los resultados, por lo que nos vamos a enfocar más bien en cómo elegimos la política pública y cuáles fueron los enfoques que utilizamos dentro del proceso evaluativo para poder llegar hasta el punto en que nosotros estamos. Entonces, la invitación está abierta. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Julio. And last but not least, our partner, Dr. Bala Yusuf-Yunusa. I will not introduce him. Bala will be at the back, in the middle of the room. Dr. Bala, a very brief introduction to your topic.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. We will be sharing the policy and institutional frameworks established to guarantee effective implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Nigeria, and share the 2 voluntary national reviews we've presented, as well as the country-led independent evaluation of priority SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and now we'll go to the actual country tables. I hope you found all of this interesting. Please choose the one that interests you the most. Nia Marie and Dr. Bala will go to the middle here. We'll have the 2 Spanish language cases with volunteers that will interpret and hear with Chinese interpretation. And we'll go back into plenary at 17:25. All right, colleagues, we have to wrap up. So thank you very much to all of our country representatives and experts. I see some of them are still very eagerly involved in presenting. But we have only 3 minutes left, so I would like to invite Ada again on stage to share some closing remarks. So, thank you. Thank you very much, Timothy. Thank you, Eddie, Julio, Nea Marie, Bala. Yeah, and our colleagues from the university in China. Over there. Just still talking. All right, everybody ready? They're in the back. Thank you very much to our speakers. Let's give them a little applause for presenting. Thank you so much, and now let me hand over to Ada for some very brief closing remarks on behalf of the partners.
Okay, colleagues, there is evidently there is lots of enthusiasm and willing to learn and to exchange experience, which is very, very good. So the conversation can continue after this, no problem. We are all eager to continue the conversation, but probably in a more informal way. So I would like to, on behalf of the partners, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland, the BAL, the German Institute for Development Evaluation, UNICEF, and IDEAS, to thank you very much for your participation. We really hope that this session has raised the enthusiasm and the awareness of the people here, of the countries that are represented here. If I may have a little bit of silence, please, that are represented here to actually conduct evaluation of the SDGs. I would like to mention that you can read these experiences in the web. They are all available. And if you can see the benefits there, you can see that the benefits actually are worth conducting the evaluation if we are conscious of the need to make a contribution to the world to more just and public policies. When we say that evaluation can contribute to a better world, this is not rhetoric. It's actually things that can happen and are actually happening in some places. With good evidence and good policy dialogue, we can actually aim to influence decisions on public policies. So if we really want to walk the talk on evaluation for a better world, we should move ahead and conduct evaluations, not because we just want to comply with the 2030 agenda, it's because we want to improve, we want a better world for everyone, and if possible, more equitable world and leaving no one behind. I think we have the elements here, and all the stakeholders are here. All these evaluations have been led by the government with other stakeholders, but always with the support of international organizations. And here, the 4 partners, plus many other organizations, are here to help. So if your country needs some advice, needs some orientation, needs support, we are here to help, and I'm sure there are many other international organizations that can help as well. So the role has changed. instead of having international organizations telling countries what to do and how to do, we are now proposing that countries knock the doors of these organizations and tell we have this idea, just support us. Don't tell us what to do. And this is, to me, an actual way of decolonizing evaluation. So by doing this, we can actually walk the talk on that, and this will be a practical example on how the rules of the game can change for the benefit of the most marginalized people in the world. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Ada, and to all of our panelists and speakers for being here with us. All of the speakers and all of us will be around for the whole week, so feel free to come over and harass all the speakers with any additional questions. We also hope to see many of you on the workshop on country-led SDG evaluations on Thursday and Friday. But for now, this is the end of the session. Just an announcement. The bus will leave at 6 for the dinner, so be sure to be there in the lobby. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us today.